I want you to try something for me. Wherever you are right now, unless you're driving, obviously, I want you to close your eyes.
Okay.
Seriously, just humor me for a minute. Visualize a specific scene. It's a Tuesday morning. It is February 2026. You are standing in the quadrangle of a school. Maybe it's the school you went to, or maybe it's a government school in Lucknow, or a Kendriya Vidyalaya in Pune.
I'm there. I can almost smell the chalk dust.
Right. The sun is just coming up, the gravel is crunching under your shoes, and the air is a bit crisp. You're 12 years old again. You've got your hands at your sides, fists clenched, looking at the back of the head of the student in front of you.
The standard morning ritual. We've
Yeah.
all been there.
Exactly. And you are waiting for the drum roll. You know the drill. Jana Gana Mana. 52 seconds. You can hold your breath for 52 seconds if you have to. It's pure muscle memory.
You can almost time it in your head.
You can. But today, the drum roll doesn't hit. Instead, a different melody starts. A slower, more sort of haunting melody. And you start singing.
And
Singing. You get through the first verse, the one about the water and the fruits. You get through the second.
Okay.
And usually this is where the music fades out, right?
That's the cutoff point we all know.
But today, it ramps up. The tempo changes. The lyrics switch from describing the land to describing, well, goddesses, swords, terror.
And you realize your lugs are getting tired.
Yeah.
Because you aren't just standing for 52 seconds, you were standing for 190 seconds.
That is over 3 minutes. Try standing perfectly still at attention for 3 minutes without locking your knees. It feels like an eternity.
And yet, as of this week, that eternity is the law.
That is the new reality we are looking at. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a massive shift in India's cultural and legal soundscape. It is February 2026, and the Ministry of Home Affairs, the MHA, has just dropped a bombshell regarding the national song, Vande Mataram.
This is significant. We're talking about the 150th anniversary of the song's composition, which falls right in this 2025-2026 window. And to mark this sesquicentennial, the government has, well, they've fundamentally changed how this song is treated, performed, and legally protected.
We have a stack of sources today, guidelines from the Ministry of Home Affairs, legal analyses, historical archives from the freedom struggle, and constitutional debates. And our mission is simple. We aren't just reading the new rules. We need to understand why a song written in 1875 is causing such a massive administrative shakeup today.
It connects to everything: history, religion, the law, and, the very definition of patriotism. Why were 4 stanzas basically hidden for decades? Why are they mandatory now? That's what we need to solve.
Okay, so let's start with the breaking news aspect of this. What exactly has changed? Because for the longest time, Vande Mataram was the national song, sure, but it felt, looser, less regulated than the anthem.
That's the perfect way to put it. It was culturally recognized, but administratively it was loose. The Constitution recognized it as equal to the national anthem, Janet Gana Mana. But there were no formal rules on how to perform it. There was no stopwatch running. That has ended.
So this is about formalization.
It's about codification.
Yeah.
The MHA has issued a codified protocol.
Codified. That sounds serious.
It is. There are 3 massive changes here that everyone needs to know. First is the full version mandate. For decades, when you heard Vande Mataram, you were likely hearing only the first 2 stanzas.
Right, the part about the rivers and the orchards, the Sufalam part.
Exactly, the safe, universally agreeable part. Now, the mandate is clear. All 6 stanzas must be sung. No cuts, no edits, the whole thing.
6 stanzas. That has to impact the timing.
Drastically. And that's the second major change. The official duration is now fixed. You know how the national anthem is strictly 52 seconds?
Yes, non-negotiable.
Well, the official duration for Vande Mataram is now set at exactly 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
3 minutes and 10 seconds.
That is 190 seconds.
Wow. 190 seconds. That is more than triple the length of the anthem. That's a long time to stand at attention.
It is a very long time, especially for a child in a school assembly. And the third change is perhaps the most symbolic. It's about the order of precedence.
What do you mean by that?
The guidelines state that if both the national song and the national anthem are played at the same event, Vande Mataram must play before the national anthem.
Interesting. So it leads the ceremony. It's the opener, not the closer.
Precisely. It acts as the precursor. It sets the cultural and historical tone before the anthem concludes the state formality. It's a complete restructuring of the ceremonial hierarchy.
So this isn't just a suggestion, this is a rule.
This is a directive for official conduct. It's filling a vacuum that existed for 9 decades. Until now, the anthem had all the legal armor, all the protocol, and the song was just there, respected, but not regulated.
And now it has that same rigid structure as the anthem.
The exact same. The same level of seriousness, the same legal backing.
Okay, let's unpack the practical side of this. If I'm a listener, where am I actually going to encounter this 3-minute, 10-second performance? Is this just for big government buildings in Delhi?
No, not at all. This is going to be quite pervasive, and I think that's the point.
Yeah.
The MHA guidelines have listed specific mandatory occasions.
Okay.
Obviously, you have the high-level stuff. The president's arrival and departures, the president's address to the nation, events hosted by governors and lieutenant governors.
The big state functions, that makes sense.
Correct. Also, civil investiture ceremonies. So if you're watching the Padma Awards or the Bharat Ratna ceremony on television, expect to hear the full Vande Mataram right at the start now.
But you said it was more pervasive.
Yes. The one that will impact the most people, specifically the younger generation, is schools.
Schools? How so?
It is now mandatory for the school day to begin with the mass singing of the full version.
Every morning?
That is the directive for every school.
That completely changes the morning assembly schedule. I mean, if you add 3 minutes to the start of every day, plus the anthem, plus the news reading, the pledge, assemblies are going to get long.
It extends the time students are required to stand in attention. And to be clear, the posture protocol is identical to the anthem.
So no slouching.
You must stand at attention. No moving, no fidgeting for the full 190 seconds.
That's going to be a test of discipline for sure. But speaking of standing, this brings up a massive flashpoint from a few years ago. Cinema halls.
Ah, yes. The 2016 and 2018 debate. I knew you'd bring that up.
I remember this vividly. There was that period where the Supreme Court said you had to stand for the national anthem in movies, and there were reports of vigilantism, people getting beaten up for not standing. It was chaotic. Does this new Vande Mataram rule apply to my Friday night movie?
This is where the government has actually applied some nuance, likely learning from that previous chaos. There is a specific cinema hall exception in the 2026 guidelines.
Okay, what does it say?
It says that if Vande Mataram is played in a cinema hall, say, as part of a movie, a documentary, or a newsreel, the audience is not required to stand.
Oh, okay. That's a relief for moviegoers.
It mirrors the 2018 Supreme Court ruling on the National Anthem, which clarified the earlier order. The logic is that a cinema hall is a place of entertainment, and disrupting that for forced protocol can lead to disorder.
Right. It prevents that vigilantism you mentioned.
Exactly. So if it's part of the film's narrative, you stay seated. If it's an official function, you stand.
That seems like a sensible distinction. But I want to pivot back to the why. You mentioned earlier that this is the 150th anniversary.
Yes, 1875 to 2025, 26. It's a major milestone.
But a psalm doesn't just survive 150 years and suddenly get a government mandate without a pretty intense backstory. Where did the song actually come from? Was it written as a national anthem originally?
No, not at all. And this is the fascinating part. It wasn't written for the government. It wasn't for a ceremony. It was written for a story.
A story.
To understand Vande Mataram, we have to go back to November 7th, 1875.
1875. The British Empire is at its peak. Queen Victoria is about to be declared Empress of India.
Exactly. A world away from today, a brilliant Bengali intellectual and government official, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, or Chattopadhyay, wrote these lyrics. He originally published them in a journal called Bangadarshan, but the song really found its home in 1882.
What happened in 1882?
He incorporated it into his famous novel, An Anmath.
An Anmath, that's a classic. But for those who haven't read it, what's the setting? What's the context?
The novel is set against the backdrop of the Sannyasi rebellion in the late 1700s. We're talking about a time of devastating famine in Bengal and a group of ascetic monk sannyasas rising up in resistance against the British East India Company.
So it's a story of rebellion against a foreign power?
It's a story of desperate spiritual resistance. In the novel, the song Vande Mataram, which means I bow to thee, mother, is the cry of these monks. It's an ode to the motherland, visualizing the land itself as a deity, as the mother.
So it starts in a book. How does it jump from a novel to the streets to the freedom struggle?
That happens a few years later, and it involves another titan of Indian history. In 1896, at a session of the Indian National Congress, Rabindranath Tagore sang it for the first time.
Wait, Tagore sang it? This same person who wrote what would become the national anthem.
The very same. Tagore set the music to Bankim's lyrics. Imagine that collaboration, Bankim's words, Tagore's voice. That moment bridged literature and politics.
That must have been an incredible moment.
But the real explosion The moment it became a mass movement anthem was 1905.
Ah, Lord Curzon, the partition of Bengal.
Precisely. Lord Curzon decided to partition Bengal along religious lines to, break the unity of the nationalist movement. The reaction was the Swadeshi movement. And suddenly this song, Vande Mataram, wasn't just a song. It became a weapon.
A weapon? How so?
Literally a verbal weapon. It became the slogan of resistance. People shouted Vande Mataram as they marched in the streets, as they boycotted British goods. It united diverse communities against colonial rule. The British actually banned the singing of it in Bengal at one point because they realized how powerful it was.
They banned a song.
They did. It terrified them. That's the power it had. It was the soundtrack of the freedom struggle for decades.
It's amazing how a piece of art can do that. It terrified an empire.
It absolutely did.
But here is where I get confused, and I think a lot of people are. If it was the soundtrack of the freedom struggle, if it was so powerful, why isn't it the national anthem? Why did we end up with Jana Gana Mana as the anthem and Vande Mataram as the national song? And why, until now, were we only singing 2 stanzas?
This brings us to the most critical and difficult part of the story, the controversy. And this is where we have to talk about the year 1937.
1937. So this is well before independence, but the movement is in full swing.
Exactly. The Indian National Congress is lighting the movement, but there are growing communal tensions. There is friction between the vision of a secular unified India and the rising communal politics of the Muslim League and Hindu Mahasabha.
And the song became a flashpoint in that tension.
It did. You see, the full song, the one we are mandated to sing now in 2026, has references that go beyond just describing the land. Stanzas 3, 4, 5, and 6 contain explicit iconography.
Iconography? Like what?
The lyrics compare the motherland to Hindu goddesses. Specifically, it equates the nation with Durga holding weapons in her hands. It compares her to Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, and the lotus. It compares her to Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge.
I see. So it's not just, I love my country, it's my country is goddess Durga.
That is the core of the issue, yes.
Yeah.
And this created a profound theological conflict. For monotheistic communities, specifically Muslims, but also Christians and others, worshiping a deity or bowing to a creation rather than the creator is strictly forbidden.
So it's an issue of idolatry.
In essence, yes. The idea of equating the land with a Hindu goddess made it religiously impossible for many Muslims to sing those later stanzas with a clear conscience. It was seen as a violation of their core belief in one God, Tawhid.
So what did the leadership do? This seems like a massive problem if you're trying to unite the country against the British.
It was a huge problem. So Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, 2 giants of the movement, with very different ideologies, I should add, sat down to find a solution. They formed a committee within the Congress Working Committee. They even consulted with Tagore. And in October 1937, they reached a compromise.
The 1937 compromise.
Yes. They decided that Vande Mataram was too historically important to discard. It was the battle cry of the movement, after all. But to preserve unity and prevent alienation in that sensitive atmosphere, they decided to adopt only the first 2 stanzas as the official national song.
Because the first 2 stanzas
Are purely descriptive. They talk about the rivers, the cool winds, the orchards, the moonlight. There's no religious iconography in the first 2 stanzas. It was a secular celebration of the land that anyone of any faith could sing.
That makes so much sense. They cut the controversial parts to keep everyone together.
Precisely. It was a pragmatic, statesman-like decision to balance cultural heritage with inclusive nationalism. And that status quo held for nearly 90 years.
Until now, until February 2026.
Right. The 2026 order effectively undoes, or you could say reverses, the 1937 compromise.
So why? What is the argument for bringing back the verses that were cut specifically because they were seen as divisive?
Well, if we look at the government's position and the supporters of this move, the argument is about, you could call it cultural wholeness or historical authenticity.
Unediting the song, basically.
Yes. They argue that cutting the song was an act of political appeasement that diluted the original revolutionary spirit of the freedom struggle. They believe you cannot censor history to suit political sensibilities.
They want the full artistic vision of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee.
Exactly. They argue that Vande Mataram in its entirety inspired the revolutionaries. People went to the gallows with Vande Mataram on their lips. So mandating all 6 stanzas is seen as restoring the original cultural symbolism and filling that institutional gap. They frame it as being about heritage, not just religion.
But the opposition to this must be fierce, right? The reasons for the cut in 1937 haven't disappeared.
If anything, they are more relevant in a modern, diverse democracy. The opposition argues that this directly violates the religious freedom of monotheistic communities. They say that forcing a Muslim or a Christian student to sing a hymn to goddess Durga isn't just a patriotic ritual, it's forcing them to violate the core tenets of their faith.
It's the difference between I respect the country and I will worship the country as a deity. That's a line for many people.
That's the line. It brings up the classic clash between two ideas of the nation: cultural nationalism, which defines the nation through a specific dominant culture and its symbols, and inclusive or pluralist nationalism, which tries to find common ground that accommodates everyone.
So the 1937 decision was pluralist.
And the 2026 decision leans heavily towards cultural nationalist.
And it's not just a debate in the newspapers anymore, it's the law. That brings us to the legal side of things. You mentioned earlier that there was a vacuum before. Now there are teeth. What happens if someone refuses?
This is where it gets heavy. We need to look at the Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act, 1971.
The 1971 Act. I thought that was mainly for burning the flag or disrespecting the anthem.
It was. Previously, the legal protections focused heavily on the anthem and the flag. The national song was a bit of a gray area legally. It wasn't explicitly covered with the same force.
But now it is.
Now it is. The new guidelines bring the national song firmly under this punitive framework.
So, practically speaking, what does that mean if a student in that assembly decides not to sing the later stanzas?
It means disrespecting the national song or preventing its singing is now a cognizable offense. The penalty can be up to 3 years of imprisonment or a fine or both.
3 years in prison. For sitting down or for staying silent?
Potentially, or for disrupting the singing. The law is designed to enforce respect through deterrence.
But wait, didn't the Supreme Court say something about this? I vaguely remember a case about Jehovah's Witnesses not singing the anthem.
You have a good memory. That is the famous Bijo Emanuel v. State of Kerala case from 1986, a landmark judgment.
Right. Tell us about that. What happened?
In that case, 3 children from the Jehovah's Witness faith were expelled from school for refusing to sing the national anthem. They stood respectfully, they didn't disrupt it, but they wouldn't sing because their religion forbids singing praises to anyone or anything but God.
And what did the court say?
The Supreme Court ruled in their favor. They said that forcing them to sing violated their fundamental right to freedom of conscience and religion under Article 25 of the Constitution. The court famously said, "Our tradition teaches tolerance. Our philosophy preaches tolerance. Our Constitution practices tolerance."
So we have a clear conflict here. The new 2026 mandate says you must sing all 6 stanzas. The Supreme Court precedent says you have a right to silence if it violates your faith.
That is the constitutional tension we are staring at. It's a collision course. On one side, you have Article 51A, which lists fundamental duties. It says citizens have a duty to respect national symbols. On the other side, you have Article 25, a fundamental right freedom of religion.
And usually rights trump duties in the court of law, don't they?
Historically, yes. Fundamental rights are considered more sacrosanct. But the government's argument now is that national honor requires a standardized protocol. They are arguing that by codifying the song, they are aligning it with the anthem, and therefore the same duties must apply to both.
It feels inevitable this will end up back in the Supreme Court.
It is almost certain. You can't mandate a hymn that explicitly names Hindu goddesses in a secular country with a history of religious sensitivity without a major legal challenge.
It is the definition of a constitutional balancing act. How do you balance the state's desire for a unified national culture with the citizens' right to their own private beliefs?
And this is not just a theoretical debate. This will play out in school grounds across the country. It will affect millions of children every day.
It's interesting you mentioned the cinema hall exception again in this context. It shows the government knows that absolute compulsion can create backlash.
Yes, the cinema exception is a safety valve. They learned their lesson from 2018. They realize that entertainment venues are volatile. But schools
are different.
Schools are where they are drawing the line. They are seen as the place to inculcate values. They want the next generation to be socialized into this full version of the song from a young age.
It's institutionalizing it, making it part of the national DNA for the future.
Exactly. As one of our sources noted, the goal is to make the full Vande Mataram as instinctual to a child as Jana Gana Mana has been for generations.
Let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the rules, the history, the law. But what is the bigger picture here? We are seeing a shift in the hierarchy of symbols. Vande Mataram playing before the anthem.
That is a very subtle but powerful signal. By placing it first, and by making it so much longer, Remember, 190 seconds versus 52 seconds. The government is giving the national song a massive footprint in the public consciousness.
It's almost like rebranding the national identity, or maybe recentering it.
Recentering is a good word. It's emphasizing the pre-independence revolutionary roots of the freedom struggle, specifically the Anamath and Swadeshi era roots over the post-independence secular compromise, represented by the 1937 decision. It's a move to reclaim the full narrative of the past, warts and all, or goddesses and all, depending on how you see it.
It's fascinating how a song from 1875 is still so alive. It's not a museum piece. It's evolving, it's fighting, it's legislating.
That's the power of symbols. They aren't static. They change meaning based on who is in power and what the country is trying to say about itself at a particular moment in history.
So what are the messages here?
In 1937, the country was trying to say, we are a united front of many faiths against a common enemy. In 2026, the message seems to be, we are a nation with a specific ancient cultural heritage that must be acknowledged in full. Two different messages from the same song.
And the listener is caught right in the middle of that shift, whether they are standing in a school assembly, receiving a Padma Award, or just reading the news.
Absolutely. This affects everyone.
So let's recap what we've learned today. We have a new daily ritual for schools starting immediately. We have a new order of precedence song first, then anthem. We have a mandatory 3-minute and 10-second performance of a text that has been debated for nearly a century.
And we have the legal teeth of the 1971 Act to back it up, with potential jail time.
Right. And most importantly, we have the restoration of the 4 hidden stanzas, bringing the debate about religion, secularism, and patriotism right back to the center stage.
A debate that was settled in 1937 has been officially reopened.
It's a lot to process, but it gives you a totally different perspective the next time you hear those opening notes. You're not just hearing a melody, you're hearing 150 years of history, conflict, and compromise, all wrapped up in a new set of MHA guidelines.
Well said.
Before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final thought.
The guidelines aim to unify the country through a shared cultural symbol. That is the stated intent. But the question remains, does compulsory patriotism, forcing the singing, mandating the standing, strengthen the emotional bond to the nation?
Or does true patriotism thrive best when it is a voluntary expression? Can you legislate love for a song?
Can you command devotion? That's the question to ponder.
It's something to think about. And hey, here's a challenge for you. After this deep dive ends, take out your phone, open the stopwatch app, hit start, and just stand there for 190 seconds. Don't move, just stand. See how long it feels. That is the new rhythm of the nation. Thanks for listening.